Imagine standing at a quiet wooden sign that reads, "Welcome to the United States" on one side and "Bienvenue au Canada" on the other. Yet no one ever braces for conflict, just waves. A border 5,525 miles long stretches from the Atlantic ice floes to the Pacific rainforest, drawn by treaties, wars avoided, surveying mishaps, and sometimes livestock. Despite spanning nearly 4 million square miles of wilderness, Canada's population hugs this line so closely that 80% of Canadians live within 100 miles of it. Today, we'll journey through centuries of diplomacy, geology, and human ambition to discover why the US-Canada border is the strangest and friendliest on Earth. Vast land, narrow lives. Covering 3.85 million square miles, Canada is nearly 1.6 times larger than its southern neighbor, but home to only about 40 million people, an average of 11 people per square mile compared to the US at 91. 100 miles from the border, the climate is milder, the soil richer, and the shipping lanes to Europe and Asia more accessible. Early French and British settlers arrived by ship, setting roots along the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes, where ocean-going vessels could dock. By 1890, Toronto already boasted 20,000 residents, its streets echoing with horse-drawn wagons beyond the Canadian Shield, a 2.7 million square mile fortress of billion-year-old rock, and you encounter thin soils, jagged outcrops, and winter so bitter few dared stay. The Shield's inhospitable terrain forced communities to cluster along rivers and lakes within sight of U.S. markets, a pattern still evident on today's maps. Drawing the line, birth of a border. In 1783, following Britain's defeat in the American Revolution, negotiators signed the Treaty of Paris, agreeing to draw a line from Nova Scotia to the Connecticut River. But map makers barely knew what lay between. Forests uncharted, lakes unnamed. California was still often drawn as an island, and surveyors relied on crude instruments. 4 decades later, the War of 1812 tested loyalties when President James Madison ordered an invasion of British Canada. The British, aided by First Nations warriors, repelled the assault, even burning the White House in 1814. When peace came, the Treaty of Ghent restored pre-war boundaries, while the Rush-Bagot Pact of 1817 demilitarized the Great Lakes, turning a once hot front into a zone of commerce and cooperation. The strait shot west, east of the Rockies. The 49th parallel offered a simple answer. The Treaty of 1818 extended it from the Lake of the Woods to the Continental Divide. But that treaty didn't cover Maine's forests nor Puget Sound's islands. Survey errors sparked the Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842, finally settling the jagged eastern border. Further west, the campaign slogan 5440 or fight threatened war over Oregon Territory, claimed by both Britain and the U.S. when James K. Polk ran for president in 1844. Americans demanded latitude 54 degrees 40 minutes north. British diplomats balked at fighting. In June 1846, the Oregon Treaty drew the line at the 49th parallel all the way to the Pacific, sacrificing Vancouver Island's southern tip to avoid bloodshed. The stretch of straight border through forests, plains, and mountains stands as a testament to diplomacy prevailing over manifest destiny, island disputes, and enclaves. Even a well-planned line met bumps. In 1859, pig farmer Lyman Cutler on San Juan Island shot a trespassing British sow. Britain sent warships. The U.S. dispatched troops. No human lives were lost, but tensions rose until both sides agreed to joint military occupation. An international commission finally awarded the islands to the U.S. in 1872, thanks to Kaiser Wilhelm I's arbitration. Meanwhile, errors in the Treaty of Paris placed Minnesota's northwest angle, an island of U.S. sovereignty, north of the 49th parallel, reachable only through Canada or by crossing ice in winter. In Darby Line, Vermont, the Haskell Library and Opera House straddle the border. You can be reading a book in Canada while your feet rest in the U.S. These quirks remind us that straight lines on paper rarely match complex landscapes. Settlement stalled by shield and rails. The Canadian Shield, composed of granite, gneiss, and greenstone up to 2.7 billion years old, covers roughly half of Canada's landmass. Its exposed rock and thin, acidic soils defied plows and foundations. For decades, settlement east of the Rockies stalled at its edge. The steam engine changed everything. In 1836, the Champlain and St. Lawrence Railroad opened, hauling ore ore and passengers on its 20-mile track. By 1853, the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railroad linked Portland, Maine to Montreal, funded by a Parliamentary Guarantee Act requiring government backing for lines over 75 miles. Rail lines like the Great Western Railway, Windsor to Niagara Falls, bridged U.S. gaps. Detroit was just 2 miles from Windsor, yet even with rails, few farmers risked the rocky wasteland. Instead, many crossed into U.S. territories, drawn by promises of prairie sod and warmer winters. Red River Rebellion and the Prairie Push. After Confederation in 1867, Canada purchased Rupert's Land from the Hudson's Bay Company for £300,000. The fertile Red River Valley lay within, home to the Métis, people of mixed Indigenous and European descent led by charismatic Louis Riel. Fearful of losing land, language, and Catholic rights, Riel's provisional government declared independence in December 1869. Ottawa sent delegates. The Manitoba Act of 1870 created the province of Manitoba, balancing Métis demands but sidelining many. Riel fled to the U.S. and federal troops secured Winnipeg, 63 miles from Minnesota. Railway extension reached the city by 1875, funneling settlers and grain westward. Yet many newcomers preferred southern plains. Only targeted recruitment inviting Ukrainians and Scandinavians used to harsh climates filled Saskatchewan and Alberta, where government homestead grants and gilded grazing leases delivered 100,000 acres for ranching and farming. Gateway to the Pacific and the North. British Columbia joined Confederation in 1871 on promise of a transcontinental railway. Survey crews wrestled with mountains, snakes of track laid by Chinese and European laborers. In 1885, the Canadian Pacific Railway linked Montreal to Granville, soon Vancouver, cementing the port city as a Pacific gateway. Vancouver's harbor, just 32 miles from Blaine, Washington, bloomed into a lumber and shipping hub. Meanwhile, Alaska's purchase from Russia in 1867, driven by William H. Seward's vision, left its status unresolved until statehood in January 1959 under President Eisenhower. Suddenly, Canada's northern border touched Alaska for the first time. Whitehorse, Yukon's capital, sits under 100 miles from Skagway, Alaska, and became a strategic waypoint in the Klondike Gold Rush and later the Alaska Highway's construction during World War II, tying northern Canada to U.S. supply lines. Modern oddities and cooperation. Despite tightened security after 2001, the border remains the world's longest undefended frontier. Under NAFTA and now USMCA, more than $1 billion in goods crosses daily. Manufactured parts, agricultural products, energy, and even freshwater. In Niagara Falls and Niagara Falls, Ontario, the same waterfall unites two countries. In Windsor and Detroit, plants straddle both sides. A car may cross the Ambassador Bridge twice before assembly completes. Yet oddities persist. Point Roberts, Washington, a 3-square-mile exclave south of Salwason, BC, needs Canadians to drive through for U.S. services. Dozens of remote crossings remain unstaffed, watchable only by camera. Seasonal workers, Indigenous rights organizations, and environmental groups coordinate across borders on fishery management, water levels, wildfires, and wildlife migration, proving that this line is as much a partnership as a division. Facing the future, Canada's median age of 41 and low birth rate contrast with America's younger workforce. To spur growth, Ottawa offers a northern allowance, higher wages for jobs above the 60th parallel, and invests in fiber optic links, ice-breaking supply ships, and healthcare in remote Inuit communities. Climate change opens the Northwest Passage and drives both opportunity and risk. Shipping lanes shorten, but permafrost melts. Indigenous land claims and environmental reviews add new dimensions to border management. Meanwhile, smart border technology, license plate reading, pre-clearance kiosks, and shared databases streamlines crossings. Yet the principle remains simple. Despite line-drawing complexity, both nations rely on each other for trade, security, and culture. That 5,525-mile line may zig and zag through treaties, but in practice, it binds communities together. That's the tale of the strangest border in the world, where treaties, pigs, railroads, and gold rushes carved a peaceful line through two continents. If you enjoyed this deep dive, like, share, and subscribe for more explorations of history's hidden stories. See you next time. See you next time.